Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, True Crime Tuesdays, where we delve into the horrors of today's society. So, episode 5. This is the case of the Gainesville Ripper, Danny Rowland.
The jury took about 6 hours over 2 days to reach its recommendations.
Those recommendations were unanimous and identical. Jurors deciding 12-0 that Danny Rowland should die in the electric chair. We'll have reaction from the victims' families and the University of Florida campus in just a moment.
And just the typical disclaimers before we start. I don't own any of the music or clips I use in this video, and all credits go to the people who actually own them. And also thank you all so much for the support on my channel, I really appreciate it. And another thing, YouTube analytics are telling me that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so if you do end up enjoying this episode or any of my other content, feel free to subscribe. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind at any given point. Now, on to today's video. Something my typical viewers will already know by now is I'm big on backstory to cases, so here's some for this case. Daniel Harold Rowland was born May 26, 1954 in Shreveport, Louisiana, to James and Claudia Rowland. His father James was a police officer for the area and told Danny he wasn't wanted since pretty much the day he was born. As well as this, James was also known to beat Danny, Claudia and his brother Kevin for the most stupid of things, to be honest, such as breathing in a way he didn't like, etc. Another incident is when his mother Claudia had to go to hospital and claimed her husband tried to make her cut herself with a razor blade. This made her try time and time again to leave James, but always returned soon after. A few main incidents that involved Danny included James pinning him to the floor, had him handcuffed, then had the police take him away because he was apparently embarrassed by him. Another story goes that Danny had a dog, but James beat the dog so often that it died in Danny's arms. He was also beaten as a 1-year-old when he wasn't crawling properly, and this was all when he was just a kid. For someone to do this to their own, very young child is absolutely disgusting to me. No kid should ever have to go through this. Full stop. During his teen years, Rowland was arrested multiple times for robberies in Georgia and was caught spying on a woman getting changed. During his young adulthood, he had trouble trying to be part of society and apparently couldn't hold a steady job. We don't really have much backstory on Danny Rowland, so this is all I'm sort of working with. But as you can sort of infer from all that, his childhood was absolutely awful. Maybe that's what drove him to it, I don't know. But you'll see there's a pattern with serial killers and stuff. If they're sort of abused in their younger years, they'll learn from that abuse and think it's okay, and it's really, really not. But that's sort of the backstory. So, on with today's case. And if you haven't noticed, my voice is really, really raspy at the minute. I don't know what's wrong with it. I've probably got tonsillitis or something. But we move, we upload, we do this. It's called commitment. So, I briefly mentioned this case at the end of the last episode, and if you haven't seen that, I'll put a link in the description to that video. In August 1990, 5 murders occurred. 1 from the Santa Fe College and 4 from the University of Florida. The bodies were mutilated and 1 was severely decapitated. Body parts paused and some skin and body parts were removed. In more than one instance, he arranged the murders with props such as broken mirrors. Between breaking out of jail several times and being fired from jobs, he completed his first kills. 24-year-old Julie Grissom, her father William, although everyone called him Tom, and Julie's 8-year-old nephew Sean in their home. I'm probably going to call William Tom because that's what everyone else called him, so I'm just saying this in case people get confused. At the time, Tom had lived in Beth Lane in Shreveport, Southern Hills. And also at the time, Julie was studying at Louisiana State University of Shreveport after transferring there earlier in 1989 and was very close to graduating when she died. Sean, Bayonet, was a third grader, or Year 4 in the UK, at Turner Elementary School. He was visiting his granddad and auntie for the weekend after a recent birthday. He was dropped off on the Friday, which was November 3rd, 1989, and was supposed to go home November 6th, but he never did. Around 8:30 on November 6th, Sean's mother called the police since she hadn't heard from Tom after leaving countless phone calls and learning her son wasn't in school. Originally, police turned to neighbours to see if the front door would be unlocked, and at around 8:45 a.m, 3 neighbours went over to the house to check on them and opened the door to the laundry room off the garage, and that's when they found the first body. Tom's body was slumped against the door, blocking the way to the utility room. He had several stab wounds in the back and the chest, and later it was made apparent he was cooking steaks on the grill at some point that evening. Sean was the next to be found. He was lying face down in the living room with one singular stab wound in the back, and the exit wound was through the chest. They quickly realised he was attacked while watching TV. Julie was found last, naked and partially hanging off the bed upstairs. She was stabbed at least 3 times in the back, but was in a face-up position after the attack. Vinegar was covering her body, probably in an attempt to cover the evidence. Authorities later found out she was meant to be at a friend's wedding that night, and the red dress that she had taken out was sent to evidence. Detectives believed that the 3 were killed around 6 to 8 p.m. on the Saturday. There was no sign of forced entry, but there was some indication of a struggle. In May 1990, he shot his then 58-year-old father twice and almost killed him, but he survived, but he actually lost his eye and his ear in the attack. Danny Rowland then changed his whole identity by breaking into someone's house and stealing theirs, basically. He fled from Sarasota, Florida, to start a new life as Michael Kennedy Jr. in late July 1990. On August 24th, 1990, Rowland broke into the home of Sonia Larson, aged 18, and Christina Powell, aged 17. He had found Christina Powell fast asleep on the couch, but chose not to attack her first. Instead, he went to the upstairs part of the apartment and stabbed Sonia Larson to death, and returned downstairs to Christina Powell and assaulted her before stabbing her 5 times in the back. Rowland then posed their bodies in provocative positions and left the apartment. A day or so later, Danny Rowland broke into the apartment of Krista Hoyt by prying the backsliding door open with a screwdriver and his knife. When she was not where to be found, and apparently not home, Rowland waited for her in the living room, and when she did, he attacked her from behind and controlled her, basically. He then assaulted and stabbed her to death. It was said he stabbed her so hard her heart ruptured and then decapitated her. One of the pieces of her body that was decapitated just so happened to be her head, and he'd posed it on a shelving unit behind her body so it'd be looking down at the rest of her body. 2 days later, he broke into the apartment of Tracy Pauls, aged 23, by breaking open the sliding glass door with a screwdriver. When he got inside the apartment, he came face to face with Manita Boda. This was the person employed by Tracy Pauls as a bodyguard due to the string of murders that was happening at the time. He was asleep when Danny originally broke in and was easily caught off guard. The pair fought and Rowland killed him. This struggle woke Pauls and she went to find out the cause. She went into Boda's room, saw Rowland, and ran back inside her room, attempting to barricade herself in. However, Rowland managed to break the door down and get inside. He then assaulted and stabbed her 3 times in the back. During the murder investigation, authorities had a prime suspect, and they didn't suspect Danny Rowland whatsoever. The prime suspect's name was Edward Humphrey, age 18, a mentally ill student from the University of Florida, and police were looking into him for a while the murders were happening, but then discovered he had manic depression and there was no actual evidence to tie him to the murders. However, at some point during the investigation, Rowland was actually arrested for assault after an altercation with his grandmother, then burglary for robbing a Winn-Dixie store at gunpoint in Ocala, Florida. This was very, very unlucky for Rowland. He was probably like all cocky and like, I'm not gonna get caught, I'm gonna do this, this, and this. But he did, and if you're gonna like murder people, then burgle somewhere at gunpoint, don't sort of like be stupid about it. Like, he was cocky about it, he was. And that's what led to him getting caught. It wasn't until early that following year that police used an extracted tooth from Rowland to link him to all the evidence at the crime scenes of the murders. Up until this point, he already had multiple life sentences for armed robberies and was then charged with the 5 murders in June 1992. This was around the time that Rowland started talking to Sandra London, who in years to come would be his fiancée and help him put together the making of a serial killer. In the beginning, Rowland pled not guilty to the murders, but used his inmate, Bobby Lewis, as a mouthpiece to confess about the murders to the police and authorities. In February 1994, Rowland changed his plea to guilty. In order to decide the sentence, a testimony from his mother was heard, who talked about all the abuse Danny Rowland had got from his father, and a testimony from a psychiatrist described that Rowland had an alternate personality named Gemini, and this is what drove him to do those insane sadistic acts that he did. 2 other psychiatrists also testified supporting that Rowland had a severe personality disorder, but also said Rowland understood everything that was happening, which didn't qualify him for insanity. I'll explain what that is. So if you plead not guilty by reason of insanity, it's because you have a mental health condition and aren't aware what's happening. So, like, you don't understand the situation because of what's going on inside your own head. It's like if you're schizophrenic, lots of schizophrenic people get away with, like, murder and stuff and just get sent to, like, a psychiatric hospital because they're known by sort of courts as criminally insane. In the end, the jury found Rowland guilty of first-degree murder on all 5 counts in late March, and a month later in April he was sentenced to death. After exhausting all of his appeals, Rowland was executed in Florida State Prison on October 25th, 2006 by lethal injection. And I probably should have explained this in like a previous video, but if you're trying to appeal your sentence, an appeal is when someone loses a case in a trial and asks a higher court to review the trial court's decision. Just before he died, Rowland recited one of his songs which resembled a religious hymn, which had the line, "None greater than thee, O Lord, none greater than thee." After that, his microphone cut out, signalling the injection had kicked in, and Danny Rowland was dead. 6 years after he died, the movie Scream was released. I did mention this in the last video, but if you haven't watched that, then I'll just review it now. So yeah, 6 years after Danny Rowland was executed, the movie Scream was released for the first time ever in 1996, and was actually based off of this case because of how sort of disgusting it was. You know, small town, lots of murder. It's just your typical horror story, it like really is. But yeah, like, horror movie junkies love the movie. Like, I can say I do. Personally, to be honest, I'd recommend the TV show and Netflix's take on it. But if you want to go for the original, honestly, just go for it, that's good too. I'm not sure where you'd find it streaming or whatever, but yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to like the video and comment your opinions on this case. because, as I've said multiple times in the past, I do love to hear people's comments on my videos. Other people's perspectives on cases are just so interesting to me. So yeah, feel free to comment all your opinions on today's episode, but sort of keep it respectful, just basic human decency, if you know what I mean. Just keep it respectful, no one will have a problem, if you know what I mean. And while you're down there, if you could subscribe to my channel, I'd also appreciate it a lot, and turn on post notifications so you never miss another upload. So until next time, this was True Crime Tuesdays.